Meeple Nation Podcast episode 467, Top Gaming Pet Peeves.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
Meeple Nation Podcast is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. We love Game Toppers so much that we have surrounded ourselves with them. We've got 2 here in Nathan's game room. Andy has 3 of them at his house. And whenever it's convenient, we even haul them to board game conventions and game nights because they really are that great. They're made out of premium quality materials. You've got military grade aluminum. The neoprene mats are 3 millimeters thick with a stitched edge, and many of them feature art by industry-leading artists. Berkey takes a lot of pride in putting out a great product. So if you'd like to enhance your game space the same way we have ours, head on over to GameToppersLLC.com and check it out.
We are the hosts of Meeple Nation. I'm Nathan Howard.
I'm Dave Holliday.
I'm Logan Howard.
I am Andy Holliday.
And I'm Douglas Stewart.
You know what's really exciting about this week? Logan's been here for 2 weeks in a row now. I think we should write that down.
It's personal best.
For reals bedales.
Personal best for at least the last year anyway.
But we are glad to have Logan back. If you are as excited as we are, you can go to our website, meeplenation.com. We have several blog posts that are there. Get a deeper insight to some of our opinions and our points of view. We also have links to all of our past episodes. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at meeplenation@gmail.com. Also on our webpage there is a link to our Patreon page. We very much appreciate those who support the podcast. It helps us to improve our equipment and helps us provide better content. If you too would like to support the podcast, we would be very grateful for that support. Once again, you can find our Patreon link on our webpage, meeplenation.com.
This week, we are going to be talking about some of our top pet peeves surrounding games and game night.
I guess I'll start us off. So
That's my biggest pet peeve right there.
is it that I started us off?
Yeah.
Awesome. Nathan's going to start us off.
Are we going to get...
Wow, with a 3-way crossover, mine too is Andy starting us off.
Okay, I'm going to go third.
Are we going to get in a big fight?
Well, Nathan technically went first because I couldn't start us off before he jumped in, which is one of my pet peeves.
I get that. I can relate.
Oh, the trajectory of this podcast is already headed in such a wonderful direction.
So my number 5, players taking turns for other players at the table.
Oh, I didn't even think about that one.
The alpha gamer.
Yes. Oh, that is so huge.
It drives me crazy.
Dave, wasn't this terrible with Arkham Horror?
Oh, yeah. Honestly, that's what ruined Arkham Horror.
The board game.
Yeah, that's...
It's a fantastic game, but the game sometimes is difficult, so we'd like, oh, hey, the game was too difficult for the first hour, we lost. Let's reset it real quick and just start playing. And it'd be like 8 hours, and somebody's just telling you exactly what you need to do on your turn, so it's like, why am I still here?
I had similar experiences with Star Wars Imperial Assault. I mean, it is a team game. It should be a team game, but when you have the alpha player who's just telling everybody exactly what they need to do, it's already kind of tough enough to be the 1 versus 5. And I mean, you have to go into those games not necessarily thinking, oh, I'm going to win. I have to win these games. You have players that are telling everybody what they need to do. Oh,
Yeah, it can totally ruin a game experience. I mean, I can kind of get it if it's someone's first time playing a game and you're trying to help them through it, especially if they're not a gamer. So my wife is not a gamer at all. I mean, she'll humor me sometimes. This is even one of her pet peeves about playing games. She hates it when people try to take her turn for her. Just let me play. Just let me play. I'm probably going to lose. I understand that. But let me play the game and let me learn it. There's nothing more aggravating when you have your turn planned out and everything's set up perfectly for you, and it's the player to your right's turn. What actions they're taking are going to not mess you up, and then the player across the table, oh, you should do this and this and this and this. And you're like, shut up. That's exactly that's going to mess up my turn completely. Shut your mouth. That drives me crazy. So that's my number 5.
Especially in a competitive game.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, especially then. I have had games where I feel like I'm playing against the table because everyone's helping that one individual and it's just wrecking my game. And it's like, it's so hard not to just stand up and be like, shut up.
Yeah.
Stop talking.
Yeah.
Let them take their turn.
I can think of several games where, in a much nicer way than that, but with that same level of frustration that has been said, let them do their turn. It's okay. They'll figure it out.
Let them take their own turn. Yeah. I've said that more than once.
Now that's a good one. My number 5 is poorly written / confusing rule books. And there's probably going to be some crossover with this one. I think with you guys, this is something we've all kind of had complaints about and gripes with over the years as we've played games together. The rule book for a game should provide a healthy handshake between the game and the players who are going to play it. And when the rule book is poorly written or confusing, it can just destroy the enjoyment you have or can have with that game. For me, as I play games and as I see kind of the direction that the industry's going in, I am very, very grateful. I think that this is a problem that's getting better. I think that developers and publishers are starting to recognize how important it is to have a really well-written rule book. Unfortunately, there are still just so many designers and developers out there who don't make this a priority. You can tell it's not a priority for them, and it can really be frustrating. One of the examples we have talked about in the past is the Etherfields rulebook. And honestly, trying to fight through that rule book was one of the reasons why I don't think it really took off for you guys the same way that it did for me. The only reason it worked for me is because I took the time to actually go to the forums and look up stuff on the webpage and find rules clarifications that were not clear in the rule book that came from the developer online and through other sources.
Not only was the unclear rules, the rule book for that game, and there are quite a few games that suffer from this, is the fact that a lot of rule books are very poorly organized.
Yeah, 100%.
It makes you appreciate the rule books that have an index, for example, especially if it's a fairly larger game, have an index on certain things that either this is the page it's on or this is what the iconography means. You know, how hard is that to put on the back of a rule book so that you have something to reference, a very quick reference guide.
A player aid.
Exactly. Especially, and I get it that sometimes there are games that have a lot of iconography that it's hard to just give each player aid, but have your last couple pages be something that is just a very quick reference. Let me see what this means, and have a decent explanation on what some of the iconography or some of the different keywords. Yeah. For example, Skyrim is one of those that I wish they would have done that with. They have certain abilities on cards, and trying to find what the meaning of that is in the rulebook is really difficult. I mean, they do have some of the iconography listed out on the back of the rulebook, but not the keyword and the key abilities that are present on some of the cards. And it can be frustrating.
Nathan, way to pull a Nathan.
I thought I silenced it.
Oh, way to pull a Nathan.
But it can be really frustrating having to open up the rule book time and time again while you're playing the game to just find one simple rule that you're looking for when it's very poorly organized.
Totally. And just as egregious as not having that information is when they do have an index in the back and you look up a key term or a rule or something like that, and it has like 4 or 5 pages listed that you need to go and reference to figure out that rule because it's so spread out throughout the entire rule book. And you've got to sit there and thumb through it and look up multiple pages just to figure out how something works.
When it's poorly written, and some of us spend like 10, 20 minutes between turns searching the internet for clarification on rules, it bogs down the whole process of playing the game. That's definitely very irksome.
Bad rules, nothing kills a game quicker. It's a great time that we live in that there's so many videos out there, but still when you go through those and there's people that are explaining the game and they're like, yeah, these rules were terrible. So here's what I best understand, to watch 3 or 4 different video sources to be able to try to piece together, go to the forums and all that extra legwork to just play a game. I mean, I understand more so with these games that have 30-page rules, but games that have 6-page rule books and they can't get that information right in 6 pages and you can't find information. Oh man, there is nothing that frustrates me more than bad rules.
Nathan, what's your number 5?
I don't know.
Not paying attention.
Oddly
Not
enough,
paying attention is your number 5.
Let's see. His number 7 is David. His number 6 is politics. And
it is actually...
tell us, Nate. Do tell.
So my number 5 is when you're playing a game and people aren't paying attention or there's excessively long turns. They go hand in hand, right? Because often they're not paying attention and then you have to assess the board at that point. What really kills me is they ask, so what did you do? Like, well, I just did it. Had you been watching, you could have paid attention. You could have been doing it. I'm notorious when a game gets long and it's in between my turns, I'll reach for my phone. I'm part of the issue on this, right? So this isn't me picking on anybody, or Dave, you might feel like I'm picking on you. But yeah, not being involved in the game and then having to take that reevaluation at the beginning of your turn because I was too busy watching videos on my phone, checking my Facebook status, or the fact that I'm not involved enough in the game that I'm causing the game to last longer. That's a big pet peeve for me.
Part of that, in my experience, because I feel the same thing for some of those games, is that I pay attention to the board too early, and then there's no sense of paying attention because the board's going to completely change by the time it comes back around to me. So then I do that for the first, second person around the table. Then I'm like, okay, I'm going to check out for a minute, let Nate take his turn, then it'll be Dave, I'll pay attention, and then I can take my turn. By that time, I'm already not paying attention. And so they just go hand in hand. Some of those games you can't pay attention too early. Otherwise, you're planning things that are not even possible in the game.
You're absolutely right when you talk about games where that game state changes with the person ahead of you. And so I understand on games like that, it's a little bit harder. I'm more of a kind of shoot from the hip, make the decision. I have no worries or concerns about winning a game. I'm there to have fun and the experience. Unless it's Dune Imperium, then I got to make sure I get that tiebreaker.
Which brings me to my number 4. No.
So
I am tired of hearing about that 13 points, though. Give it a rest, Nathan.
Beat him next time and you won't have to hear about it.
He's not wrong.
Shots fired.
David,
I forgot what I was going to say.
your number 5 is 5.
Yes. Yeah. I mentioned last week, right, how long it takes me to, I have to invest so much time and thought to come up with a top 5 of anything. I can't spend that time thinking about negative things because then I'll just be depressed forever. So I'm just going to chime in on yours. And I mean, and let's be honest, I mean, most of them are going to be, most of my pet peeves are probably me related. Like long turns is one of my things as well, right? Like it's something that I hate and I try so hard to curb because I know the effect that it can have. And so, yeah, so I'll just be chiming in a little bit here and there.
That's the same with me. I even actually took my numbers off of the list, so you did more prep work than I did.
So my number 4 is Seafall. Just kidding.
I believe it. Actually, I figured it would be higher on your list.
Thought it'd be number 1.
No, it goes back to long turns. Long turns. If a game takes twice the amount of time it should take for its max play time, that's too long for me.
When you're at SaltCon and you can play an entire game in between your turns.
Yes, exactly. I need to reiterate this. I don't mind if a game takes longer to finish if in between my turns isn't so ridiculously long. And Logan, you bring up a good point. I mean, that brings me back to why the biggest issue I have with Terraforming Mars, the turns are sometimes not necessarily long in between turns, but I'll pass and then I won't get another turn for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, sometimes 45 minutes before the end of the round happens. Then it's back to my turns are fast. I get done, I pass, and then I'm back to waiting for forever for everybody else to finish. That's an issue. Plus just games that bog down with such long turns, 20 minutes before it gets back around to you. And it just makes the game not very enjoyable.
And then if you're not there for your turn, like in Terraforming Mars,
right,
and everybody else gets mad at you, I haven't done an action in 20 minutes. And you're getting mad at me because I'm not there on the spot. Yeah, that's when I just don't come back.
It's part of the reason why I don't play Terraforming Mars.
So my number 4, and I had kind of a hard time deciding exactly what to call this. So I kind of just landed on lack of concern or lack of thoughtfulness to the actual player experience by developers. What I mean by this, and I guess maybe I'm cheating because I'm kind of throwing a few little nitpicks into one category. But what I mean by this is things like when a publisher produces a game with an insert that won't hold the cards if you sleeve them, or they make a game but it doesn't have player aids and needs them, right? Or just little things like they didn't put an icon guide on the back of the rule book. These just quality of life things that are so easy and are so prevalent. I mean, this is known stuff. Our industry has grown to the point where every publisher out there should know these are things you need to do. And yet there are still so many that choose not to do them. And one of my big pet peeves when it comes to this is just the misinformation on the box, right? I mean, it's almost a running joke now because you see the amount of time that a game should take listed on the side of the box, and it's just like lies.
Yeah,
it's just
like,
straight
did
up
you guys
lies.
ever do this?
Yeah, 100%. And I get that maybe for your first game, learning maybe even 2 or 3 games, things might be a little bit slower. But I have tons of games, probably the majority of the games that I have on my shelf that I look at the time they have listed on the box and it's like, no, absolutely not. Not even if everybody is playing at peak speed, that game does not play that fast.
Right.
There's absolutely no way. And then the other thing that really bothers me too is they'll put the player count on the box. And it's one thing to say, well, this game plays 1 to 5 players, and it technically does, even though 4 or 5 players might be miserable. That's fine. At least you're not lying to the people that are purchasing the game. But I hate it when they'll say something like, it plays 2 to 4 players. But what they really mean is it's a 2-player game. And if you want to add a third or a fourth, you've got to play in teams or pair up in some sort of way. And there's not a good way of putting that on the box, and they never do. So it's just kind of a bunch of these little grievances, these little kind of quality of life things that I know publishers know they need to do, and they just don't.
So first world problems.
First world problems.
Well,
my number 4.
and going back to your not having room for sleeved cards, what drives me crazy is when you kickstart something and they have card sleeves as part of your Kickstarter and don't leave room for the cards that are sleeved in the box.
100%. We're looking at you, Bard Sung.
Or when you kickstart a game, you pay extra for a neoprene mat, and so they don't include the regular game board in your box.
We're looking at you, Return to Dark Tower. Just all these little kind of nitpicky things that I really believe they have to be some sort of deliberate choice by the publisher, because I know they know.
Right.
These are not things that any publisher worth their salt should overlook.
And I've heard people say, going to like BGG Con, I've heard people talk about some of these grievances, and they're like, well, the community will produce something. You can find player aids on BGG. Again, I mean, that's not fixing the problem. I mean, yeah, there's a solution out there, but that is not fixing the problem.
It's the biggest cop-out ever.
Yeah.
I didn't want to put in the effort, but don't worry. Somebody else playing this game will put in the effort.
Somebody will create an FAQ. Somebody will spell check my rules later. My number 4, we just handled, is the post-game review. I hate it when you're playing a game and then somebody brings up the tiebreak of Dune Imperium over and over and over again, or explains how they took the time and the actions that they did that made their victory against you so much better, or they whine and complain about what they didn't get to do on their turn that caused them the game.
So Nathan's number 4 is himself.
Yes, absolutely.
That's funny, is that to me is actually, I kind of feel the opposite with that, right? One of the things that makes a good game for me is it provides me the opportunity to review my play afterward to see what I could have done better. I mean, that's what I like about a good strategy game. I can go through and go, okay, yeah, that's where I went wrong here. If I had done that, then I could have done this. And I know Richie's the same way. I do get when like if somebody demolishes you in a game and then they want to go over that.
Yeah, you're making my point is that you want to review what you did. Yeah. I don't want you to review what I did.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%. Because I think some post-game analysis can be a lot of fun. Actually, like you said, Dave, I think that's the sign of a good game when everybody, after it's done, kind of wants to sit and analyze the play and how things went and how the mechanisms worked and everything else. I think some of that's really healthy and good. I do agree with Nathan, though, in that when it turns into this, like, well, this is what you should have done. It's almost the post-game alpha player, right? Like, this is how you should have played. This is the strategy you should have done, that kind of thing. And we've all sat at tables where somebody's kind of post-game alpha'd us and it's no bueno. It's not good.
Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between like, oh, you totally missed this. You missed a key element there that would have blocked me from doing something. And that's a little bit different as opposed to, I totally kicked your butt. And this is how I did it. And this is how I'm going to do it again. And next time we play, I'm going to do it the exact same way.
Yeah, there's a lot of difference between debating strategies like, oh man, I really thought this strategy was going to beat you. And I saw you pulling away, but I thought I could pull it off with this. There's a lot of difference between that and the monologuing that you're talking about.
Yeah, and monologuing, I think, is probably a great description of it. Yeah, the post-game monologue.
And we never wanted to get the monologuing.
Caught me monologuing with those 13 points.
You slide dog. Oh, that's awesome.
My number 3 is poor quality components. There are some games that I own that I play and I'm just like, a little bit disappointed every time I play it. And it's not the gameplay, it's the fact that the components are garbage. I think of my copy of actually every copy I've seen of Altiplano. The game is wonderful. It really is. But I've never seen a game with such poor components.
I have replaced almost all of my components with either Geek Up bits or 3D printed stuff because the game is awesome.
It
But
is,
you're
it's
100%
great.
right. The components for that are terrible.
Yeah, they fall apart. The cardboard separates. It is just really disappointing every time I play it. And maybe I just need to do that. But you shouldn't have to upgrade your components because your game components are falling apart.
Absolutely.
It's one thing with the Quacks of Quedlinburg where, yes, they wear out, but they're wearing out because the game's so fun and you're playing it a ton. It's not that necessarily they're falling apart. It's just that it's getting played so much that the cherry bombs are wearing out.
Yeah, we talked recently about Tortuga 2199. We decided that was the glue that they used that bowed those tiles that make them impossible to lay flat and really disrupts the play of the game.
Yeah, and there's nothing worse than being excited to get a game, open it up, you pull the shrink off, you pull components out, and your boards are warped. That poor quality of component really can make for a super disappointing experience, especially for a first-time play of a game when you're excited to unbox it and get it to the table. Like I said, with Altiplano, that's every time I get that to the table, I'm just like, oh my gosh, these components are absolute garbage.
Yeah, I was really excited to bust into Hamlet, which is a Kickstarter. It was the Kickstarter version of the game that Nathan and I recently got. And I pulled it out and started putting it together. And it has this little church, like a 3D church that you put together for the middle of the board. And the game's great. I'm not trying to bash on the game at all, but that 3D component that it needed you to build, I mean, it fell apart in the process of building. I mean, completely fell apart. It was terrible cardboard quality. And there's nothing more disappointing than paying a significant amount of money for some of these board games and pulling them out and realizing that they really cut corners with something as simple as cardboard.
Let me reiterate, though. I think all of the games that we've pointed out are really good games that we love. Unfortunately, they just have those slight flaws in the components.
That's why it's frustrating because we do love them and we want them to be better.
So my number 3, we already hit on, and that was bad rules.
Do we want to keep the same
Were we
order
just
or do we
doing
care?
No, we
was just me.
didn't. But my number 3 can
You
be
just did me.
when people skip over
That's what I
other
did.
people and start their turn already.
Yeah. I'm notorious for that, too. This is everything Nathan does.
Really brought your
I'm with
A
you.
game
I'm with
tonight,
you,
Logan.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be back.
My number 3 is the complication and wait time involved in backing and receiving Kickstarters these days. And I want to talk Kickstarters for just a minute here, okay? Because I get the appeal of Kickstarters from a publisher's point of view. If you're an established publisher, Kickstarter allows you to remove a lot of the financial risk and burden for producing and making some of your games. It's kind of a pre-order method. And so it lets you really hone in on your dollar amount in an industry that I think has pretty razor thin margins as it is. And I also really appreciate Kickstarter because it provides an avenue for making games that would absolutely not be able to be made any other way. We would not have many of the games that we have sitting on our shelves and that we enjoy playing on a regular basis if it was not for Kickstarter. So I am grateful in many ways. But what I'm referring to is this whole process that you have to go through to back and get Kickstarter games. So walk through the logic here with me for just a minute and tell me that I'm wrong. First, oftentimes, and especially now, this is a little bit more of a new thing. You'll first get an announcement, right? Hey, this game's coming out. Sounds cool. Sounds really interesting. We've got a Kickstarter preview page coming soon. So you wait a little bit and then a Kickstarter preview page comes out. You go check it out and it's like, hey, Kickstarter campaign launching in like 3 months. Click here to get notified. So, okay, all right, click here. You wait. Finally, the campaign launches. So then you go in and you've got to, like, with some of them, it's pretty clear, but with others, it's like, you got to get out your decoder ring to try to figure out what you want to order, what the add-ons are, what package you want to back, all these different things. You finally kind of figure it out, decide on a pledge, level that's comfortable for you. You sell a kidney on the black market to pay for it, whatever you got to do. And you go ahead and you commit, you back your game. Okay, well, then you're watching your email because a pledge manager is going to launch and you don't want to miss it. Because if you miss the pledge manager, you risk missing out on some of your rewards. You miss earlier shipment. You miss a lot of the stuff that comes with kind of being Johnny on the spot with your pledge manager. So you're watching your emails. Finally, the pledge manager launches. Okay, so then you're going in and you're like, wow, they've got a bunch more add-ons. Do I need this? Do I need that? You're trying to figure out the pledge manager, and there's not a universal one. They're all different. So you've got to figure out whatever system that they're using. You're kind of looking at everything they have offered that's Kickstarter exclusive or whatever it might be. Your FOMO's kicking in, you're spending more money, finally check out, and you look at the shipping cost, half the cost of the original game. You're already in it. So you go ahead and pay it. And then the long wait begins, right? Then you wait, and sometimes a year, sometimes 2.5 years for some of these Kickstarters. And then the Kickstarter arrives, it's in these big boxes. It takes an entire Saturday, to punch and sleeve and organize and all this stuff. And then you sit it on your shelf and you go, I wonder when we're going to get that played, because we have a mountain of campaign games that are left unfinished, and you don't want it to just go on the heap, but inevitably half of them do. And just this whole process of sort of ordering and waiting for and going through the Kickstarter process to get some of these games that we play, it's starting to really take a toll on me in particular. And it's to the point where I have just ratcheted way, way back on Kickstarters because this process is starting to get kind of ridiculous.
You're absolutely right. Last year in 2022, I think I backed 3 Kickstarters, which is a huge reduction for me. Anything that's coming out this year, it's going to have to be something that's going to blow me away to get me to get involved. And you bring up some of those frustrations that you are spot on. There was one Kickstarter I backed. I can't even remember what it was. You want to get everything, so I get the all-in pledge. It reads all in, so that means all in, right? My pledge gets here, and I start opening the box, and I don't have the base game. How in the hell... How in the world does my all-in Kickstarter pledge not include the base game?
Yeah, for sure.
I just have one problem with all what you just said, Nate. Doug told us to tell him he was wrong, not that he was right.
He's not wrong. You run into the situations, and I've missed pledge managers, and that actually reminds me, I got to push back on my Arcana Rising. I missed the pledge manager, and the pledge manager didn't work, and a couple months back, I said, hey, I need to get it. The guy's like, oh, well, Venmo me the shipping, and then I'll send it right out. Tonight, as we're talking about this, I've completely forgot that he still hasn't sent me. So I Venmo'd to pay for the shipping because I missed the pledge manager, and I have to follow up because I may have just given them a nice tip. Still not received my game. And so, I mean, you're absolutely right. And there's so many frustrations that are there. But if Kickstarter wasn't there, there's so many games that we wouldn't have.
Yeah, and there's so many games that you wouldn't have 2 copies of too, Nate.
Screw you, Dave.
One of my issues with Kickstarters too is there's like such an issue with how financially it works because all of them are set up differently. Some of them are 2 weeks, some of them are 6 weeks. Instead of just taking my money in the moment, because I'm like, oh yeah, I got the money now. And then it comes up later, oh, by the way, you charge this. And then, oh, the pledge manager opens. Then you have to spend the time, like Doug said, like combing over, like going back over the Kickstarter page of what I actually backed and what pledge level it was. Oh, I got to add this and this and this to make it up. And then it's like, it feels like 3 or 4 times they're charging you for the same product. And it's just like, how many times do I have to like submit my debit card? And I just want the stupid game.
Or you get the all-in pledge and then you realize that doesn't include any of the add-ons. And you have to get all the add-ons on top of it, even though you did the all-in pledge. Much less the base game, right, Nathan?
Yeah, absolutely. If it says all in, it better be all in.
I feel like we could talk for a long time about Kickstarters, Kickstarter exclusives, component quality, shipping issues, just all kinds of things. But I think that gives us a pretty good taste of what I think is my pet peeve when it comes to Kickstarter is just the whole process and how long it takes and how complicated it is. The industry, I think, needs to figure out what the next innovation is to still be able to produce some of these games that we wouldn't get otherwise that still are going to require some crowdfunding, but to do it in a more streamlined way.
So my number 3s can be really short because we already talked about it, and that is bad rules. Bad rules drive me nuts. I shouldn't have to do a ton of research just to read the stinking rules.
My number 2 will be short as well, and that is bad rules. They absolutely drive me crazy and can totally ruin the game. I know we've talked about it already, but Etherfields is one of those where I like the game itself. That's, I think, the biggest reason why we stopped playing is just the fact that the rules were so aggravating and so terrible and clunky.
My number 2, I have just called breaking the social contract. So when we gather to play games, there is kind of this unspoken social contract that forms. We're all here to play a game. We're going to adhere to its rules, and we're going to be civil in the process. That's what we're gathered around the table to do. This is kind of the social construct that takes place. My number 2 is people who violate that sort of unspoken social contract. And that comes in the form of, we've already talked about it, playing around on your phone when you should be paying attention or taking your turn. Ignoring the rules teach, I think, is breaking the social contract. And again, these are things we've mostly talked about already, but taking long turns or submitting to analysis paralysis. Players who do this are kind of communicating, whether they mean to or not, that their time and their enjoyment of the game is more important than yours. It's more important than the other people at the table. In my opinion, that's kind of a violation of the social contract that forms when you come together to play a game. I was talking to Lydia. I was kind of asking her what she thought about this. And I thought it was interesting because she brought up a couple of points too. She said she hates it when other people lie about the experience that she's going to have playing a game. Right. And to her, that was a violation of the social contract. Right. She doesn't want to hear you say, oh, this is a really easy game and it's only going to take 20 minutes if it's not really an easy game and you're going to be there for an hour and a half. So being honest about the experience that you're going to have. And then also just not respecting the sort of physical game space and the actual game for whoever's hosting. All of these things are part of that set of unwritten rules that is there and in place when you gather to play a game. And so violations of that social contract are annoying. We'll put it that way.
For sure.
No, I think those are some great points because that sums up so many issues. I'm pretty picky about who I play games with. I guess no, I'm pretty open to who I'm going to play games with. I'm very picky on who I'm going to play a second game with.
Right.
And we talk about some of those pet peeves that come back, like I had an individual that back in the days when we were playing Star Wars customizable card game, where that post-game review was there in depth to nauseam about how I was defeated. After I lost, I was like, okay, we lost. Let's play something else. Let's play it again. Let's do something else. I don't need the post-game review. And I think that goes right in hand with your social contracts that you're talking about. If you go to somebody's house, respect their house. What you bring into the house, how you act in the house.
So no biting other players?
Yes. You would think we don't have to bring that up.
What was that?
A real life example?
Yeah, you would think we wouldn't have to bring something like that up. But yeah, that's a real life example that don't bite my daughter. To have that awkward conversation with somebody. Respect is huge. Even when you're at a convention, respect the convention's library. At BGG Con, we've gone and we've played Shadows of Brimstone. We open up that box and it looks like somebody just took their arm, swept the table, shoved it all in the box, and returned it. When you do something like that, when you're using somebody else's stuff, respect their stuff. As Julie says, respect the game.
That's where I was about to go.
Yeah, and it's not just the physical space and the physical game. It's also just respect in general. Game night is not a time for you to, get up on a soapbox and tout your political beliefs or religious beliefs or whatever it might be. All of that, I feel, is part of that social contract. Now, obviously, that's different when you're playing with people who you play with regularly and you know them and you have an established relationship. But especially when you're playing with new players, it's not the time to be political or to say emotionally charged things or have overwrought strong opinions about things or whatever the case may be. Just be respectful, be civil. Well, I have successfully snuck about a dozen different things into my number 2. So Nathan, tell us about your number 2.
So my number 2 is on my number 2 because of a very recent experience. And we get these games, they're full of great content. You open a box, it's got 8 sheets of cardboard, you pop everything out, and then you go to put it back in the box. Now it's not going to fit. Drives me nuts. So I just opened up my copy of Sword and Sorcery. It has 8 sheets of cardboard, box that contains the minis that come in it, comes in a box to keep those all in place. But then when you start to put out those pieces, you put them in baggies, and now your box lid floats a whole inch off the bottom. Unless you laid everything flat in that box as it was on those punch boards, there's no way it's going to fit back in that box. And if your game is that tight, make the game box a little bit thicker. Going right along that same line is game boxes that include inserts that don't work. There's some games that do it exceptionally well. Camel Up, I think Camel Up 2nd edition, their insert is great. Dice Forge is huge. The way that box is laid out, everything has a place and a place for everything, and it works. You have other games where they have an insert and first thing you do is chuck that insert out, put everything in bags to put it in the box because the insert doesn't work.
I have thrown so many inserts away. So many that just go in the trash because they're worthless.
Yeah. That drives me to anger. So, I mean, I look at this game of sword and sorcery, and so I'm now considering if I'm going to put this in the box, do I pull out all those minis that are in the nice protected box and put them in a baggie so that I can fit everything in the box? Or do I have to come up with an off-market secondary solution that will allow me to put everything into one box and then write on that box that this is sword and sorcery? Drives me nuts.
And I like the fact that they are coming out with, big box solutions for games, especially that will fit all the expansions. Some of those don't even fit all your components. Or they come out with a big box expansion to fit everything, but then you can't get it. It was available and now it's not.
Talking about Wingspan.
I sure am talking about Wingspan. That is one of my games that I've tried to consolidate as much as possible, but my main box, it's in 2 boxes, and my main box, I can't get it to close, and the expansion box, it doesn't close all the way either. But I don't want to have a million Wingspan boxes on my shelf and taking up space. So it would have been awesome to have been able to have that in one box. Not only that, I've taken Wingspan to different conventions, and I believe I took it to Hug a MeepleCon down in Harriman and totally forgot to bring one of the boxes, which has all the cards in it. So we couldn't play the game because it was in 2 boxes. It would have been nice to have had it in one box and have it all fit.
Games like Star Wars Imperial Assault, there's all these expansions, and so to condense content, I have bought a large oversized tackle box to be able to sort and organize, and then I still have to have a second box for the terrain tiles. Some people might have room on their shelves to store their 12 boxes of Dominion, but if I have a game that has multiple boxes, I'm going to do everything I can to condense it into one box.
I think what you mean is some people have storage on their shelves to show off their 12 expansions of Dominion.
12 boxes of Dominion? No, I think, yeah. I mean, I have games that I like to show off too, and you go over to Doug's house, and Doug's house has a lot of games that are on display on the top of his shelves, which look really nice. I guess when you have a Nathan issue where you have what you thought was going to be enough room, but turns out to be limited room, and you have a lot of games and have issues, and you keep buying more games, that you run out of these spaces that you need to condense. And so, all my Dominion goes into an artist box. All of my Marvel Champion goes into an artist box. My Star Wars Imperial Assault goes into a tackle box.
I use the tackle box for my Descent as well.
And you look at our Gloomhaven. Well, we got Gloomhaven, we got the bottom box and the lid. The lid is there to hold what we can't fit in the box.
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the companies not worrying about issues. And oh, don't worry, somebody else will figure it out. Oh, don't worry, they'll buy an artist box for this game. You should have just planned for the box to be an inch taller. How much more would that have cost? Was that like $1 per box? Yes, that's expensive. I'm sure people would have been okay paying the extra $1 to get the space for the game.
Well, and I know that it's more to it than that, especially with shipping costs and everything else. They're trying to get their boxes to fit into a specific size, and I understand that. But at the same time, how much more is it to ship it for the next size up? I don't know. I'm sure there's more to it than what we probably see, but as a gamer, it can be incredibly frustrating to have to deal with that.
Yeah, and ultimately, those packaging engineers are amazing, right? And you generally see that when you open up that box and you see those 8 flat pieces of cardboard that fit perfectly. It would just be a little nicer if they would use their amazing talents for the final product of popping it all out.
Yeah. I mean, you have games that have that insert that is there that we've all seen it, that has the 2 raised edges and then the valley in the middle where everything is shoved in. And then you take that cardboard, you throw it out, put everything in bags, and it fits in the box. Going back to Sword and Sorcery, where that box is laid out perfectly for those sheets. And then once those are punched, it's not going to go back in that box.
All right, Andy.
My number 1 pet peeve is players that have a play style that will target different players when the gameplay doesn't necessarily warrant that. Now, I know there are games out there that are like that. That's just how the game's played. I don't typically play those games because that drives me crazy. I hate the feeling of being hamstrung in a game where I don't feel like I can do anything at all, and it's not enjoyable for me. And when players play that way to where they're just trying to stop you from doing stuff instead of just playing their own game, that drastically reduces my enjoyment to the point where it's just like, I don't even want to play this. I know it surprises you guys, but I'll get ticked off when that happens.
Really?
I
Yeah.
don't believe it. I don't
I've
believe
never seen such a thing.
You probably haven't. I hope you never do. But it is something that it will completely ruin the experience to where I may not play that game with that person ever again.
Yeah. We played Attica at the end of the year last year. James, Richie, and I can't remember who else, and myself. And as we're playing the game, James is kind of playing his own thing. He's quiet. He's not really announcing anything. And he's really close to connecting his two temples. And then all of a sudden, everybody starts pointing out, well, James is going to win if we don't block it. And so they announced it on my turn. I'm like, well, I can't do anything about it. And then it's Richie's turn. Well, Richie can't do anything about it. And then it's the next person. Well, I'll block him. James gets blocked. And then James tries to work around and finds another path. And he's almost there again. And it comes back and it's announced, well, James is going to win. Who's going to stop him? Well, I can't stop him. Well, Richie's going to stop him this time. Experiences like that, where for James, it was a very, very sour experience. He felt like everybody was teaming up against him. So it felt like a one versus many, like you talked about, Doug, where you're playing against the table.
It's peasant making.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of king making. And
See-
I actually had the same experience with Attica. I was doing really well, and then it was like everybody's took their turn trying to stop me in some way, shape, or form. And it was very frustrating.
I see Attica as that's kind of part of the thing with Attica, right? Like, game is over, he's going to win unless this happens right there. So like with what you were saying at the beginning, Andy, where, some games, when the game doesn't warrant it, right? Like, it's more warranted in a game like Attica than it is in other cases.
I would agree with that because you are basically trying to get there first, and you have to block that person or they're going to win. I get it. What bothers me about Attica, and it's maybe the experience that James had, is somebody's got to block them and everybody's basically conspiring, right? If you're not paying attention, you don't block me, well, that's on you. But when you have the whole table communicating, okay, how are we going to stop him? How are we going to stop him? That can ruin an experience for somebody. And it kind of goes along with that social contract, right? When everybody's there to have fun. And if you're going to try to potentially ruin someone's game experience just so that you can win the game, I like winning games just as much as anybody else. I can have just as much fun playing the game and losing if I felt like I did a good job or I played well and it was fun. But if I feel like I'm hamstrung and I can't do anything, then even if I win, I hated the game. It wasn't very much fun at all. That is why it's my biggest pet peeve, is because it can be an incredibly fun game that I love. And if someone comes in and plays that way, where it's just, I'm just going to stop you at every single thing and I make it so you can't progress what you're trying to do. When you can't do anything, what's the point of playing?
Yeah. When you take away the fun of the game, make it what it was, a fun experience, a very negative experience, you're most likely not going to want to play that game again.
I think this is a great discussion. I think it's important to note that this can also take place during cooperative games. You can have that player who their play style is such that, like you said, even though the game doesn't necessarily warrant it and is trying to get everyone to cooperate and think about the good of the team and the group, you can still have that player who they've got to be the first one through the door. They've got to be the first one to grab the treasure chest. They've got to be the only one that grabs any coins, or the one that has to deal the final blow, or whatever it may be. And they can take a cooperative game in the exact same way.
But in Gloomhaven, that's something we discuss. Like, I really need to get the chest. I really need to open that door. Where as opposed to, I think in the example that you're using, where it's just somebody is just doing it.
No talking, no discussion, nothing with the group. It's just boom, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I am thinking of someone in particular. It is not someone here, but I did have a player who did that consistently, and it was egregious. And it got to the point where it was like, I don't want to play games with this person anymore.
Totally have had experiences. And I think that's why I go back to my original quote, I will play any game with anybody, but I am very particular about who I'll play a second game with.
Awesome. Well, my number one, and I will keep this short because it's fairly simple. This is my number one pet peeve by a mile, and it is gatekeeping of any kind. I know that we all kind of struggle with this from time to time. It's something that I've caught myself doing and something that we all need to work on. But gatekeeping really, really drives me crazy. People who think that the hobby is exclusive, or they have to play certain games or a certain way to be a real quote unquote gamer. Give me a break. We're all gamers. If Uno's your jam, awesome. You are a gamer. That's great. We do not need to impose our set of sort of beliefs or preconceived notions on anybody else. This kind of works in the opposite as well. I've seen people who almost try too hard to convert others into the hobby or make them play games that they're not ready for, that they know they're not going to enjoy, or that just aren't their play style. Anytime we do anything to sort of dictate how someone else enjoys the hobby, it really, really bugs me. I can't stand that gatekeeping.
I see that all the time. And like you said, I've been a little bit guilty of that myself on different occasions. I think you're spot on. All right. My favorite pet peeve, and by favorite, I mean my least favorite pet peeve, is when someone's teaching me a game. I'm listening to Andy teach me a game, and Andy gets 30 seconds into it, and then Doug starts teaching me a game. And then Dave picks up and says, well, Doug missed this. And then Logan chimes in, well, here's the strategy. When you're getting a table telling me how to play a game, you can't listen to 4 people at the same time. Nothing drives me more batty than when someone's trying to teach me a game and everybody's interjecting. On the same point, nothing makes me more irritated than when I'm trying to teach a game and somebody starts to step over me. I'm not a perfect game explainer by any means. There's stuff that I'm going to forget, and there's stuff that I might unintentionally omit.
Pocket rules.
Yeah, pocket rules, yes. And that's not necessarily something I plan, but if there's something I miss or something that I didn't explain in a fashion that is pleasing to you, please wait till I am done and then go back and say, hey, you forgot this. There's nothing more irritating to me when I'm teaching a game that I've played dozens of times, and then somebody who's played it once or twice thinks they have the handle on it or doesn't like the way that I'm teaching the game and steps on my toes and steps over me. I mean, I'll instantly stop and I'm like, okay, you go for it. Because as part of my pet peeve, I'm not gonna try to trump you and just make the situation worse. If you're gonna teach it, you're gonna teach it. Nothing that drives me more mad, and nothing that will almost make me get up and walk away from the table than when somebody starts teaching a game over my teach.
So I have a question about this.
Yes.
So you brought up like a specific example, like if you forget something and you want to wait until you're done. You mean you want them to wait till you're done with the whole explanation? Because I feel like at times there are things that like it fits with a certain spot, right? Like
right. There's definitely times when you can say, hey, are you going to talk about, and you can say, are you going to talk about this?
Okay.
And when somebody interrupts and says, are you going to talk about that? That's fine. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get to that. I prefer to explain it when it makes sense to me over here. That's the issue, is that the way I'm explaining is not necessarily the way that other people like it explained. And I get that, but have the courtesy to wait till after I'm done, and then don't say, well, that's nice, but let me explain it to you this way. It goes back to that social contract. Be aware of who's got the talking stick.
We actually had an experience with this exact thing at SaltCon last year. We were sitting around. Doug had started teaching us viticulture, and then we had someone come and start teaching us viticulture, and then we had a third person come to start teaching us viticulture. And poor Doug's just like, all right, I'm out. I'd played the game before, and I was confused by the end of the discussion. In fact, I think I'd played the game like 2 or 3 times, and I feel bad for these. I know it was Sierra's first time, and
it was my first time as well. Like, guess who didn't learn how to play viticulture at SaltCon that time?
And Amberley's. Yep.
Yeah, it was
there were
really,
several
really
new players at the table.
Yeah, it was terrible. Having played it once, and I was more confused. I couldn't even imagine how you guys felt. And it was one of those where my daughter Sierra came up to me. She's like, that game looks really fun, Dad, but I had no idea what I was doing the entire time we were playing. So I ended up getting it at BGGCon, and it's one that I need to play with her so that she actually has a positive experience with it, because she was incredibly frustrated being a new player and having the rules explained in that exact way that you described. It's not helpful. It's not helpful to the players. It's not helpful to the person that's trying to teach. It just muddies the waters. My
favorite example of this was just recently at
Shut your mouth, Dave. Shut it. I know where you're going with this. Just be quiet. This podcast's going on too long. Anyway.
Yes.
Until next time.
It was hilarious because we had just finished talking about this very pet peeve of so many people at the table here. And then Doug's daughter was trying to teach a game, and another daughter was getting involved, and then several people were getting involved, and I was laughing hysterically inside, knowing
I was trying to be the dad,
the mediator.
Right? I was trying to be the mediator. I was trying to step in and be like, okay. This is how we play the game. And what I really should have done is just shut up, because I made it far worse. Although it did generate some laughs, so I guess it was okay. But no, I think we all have this problem from time to time. Teaching a game is an art. And learning how to be quiet when somebody else is teaching a game is also an art.
Yeah.
And knowing when it's kind of appropriate to maybe just like reach over and tap on a card, just like as a reminder, like, hey, make sure you cover this, or to just mention something because it's important, versus just being quiet and butting out, letting somebody teach the game. And oftentimes, if there are things that get skipped, it's going to come up in gameplay, right? Somebody's going to go, oh, wait, what about this? And then there's an opportunity to go over it again or teach it the right way or better way or something like that. But just being quiet and letting somebody teach the game is so important.
It may be helpful, in my experience anyway. If I think someone's missed something, even if I've played it, I'll ask it as a question. Well, what about this? Can you do this or can you do this? And that's not going to step on someone's toes. That gives them an opportunity to explain something that maybe they've missed, but not feel like you're trying to teach it. You're just asking and trying to get clarifications rather than saying, hey, no, you missed this. This is how we're supposed to play it, right? That is far less intrusive on the person trying to teach than jumping in and feel like you're trying to actually teach the game.
Well, this has been an in-depth at some of our pet peeves, some of our struggles that we face on maybe a regular basis or maybe on an occasional basis. But I'm sure your list of pet peeves are similar, and maybe you have some that didn't even make our list. And once you start talking about it, we're like, oh yeah, that is maddening for sure. Give us a shout out at meeplenation@gmail.com and let us know some of your biggest gaming pet peeves.
Until next time.
We'll see you flipping the table at the game table.
As always, we want to thank you for listening.
Check out our website. We have all sorts of cool things there. Love those blogs. Get a deeper look into the writing side of Meeple Nation.
Join our Facebook group, Meeple Nation Off Air. I look forward to seeing you there.
Follow us on Twitter @Meeple Nation. We also have Instagram.
Under the same name. We also want to thank our sponsor, GameToppersLLC.com.
We love their product, and they have so much goodness out there.
And we also want to thank Braden Detergent for our music.